I mean, I'm just gonna ask you. I say, well, he could be playing, however, there are 4 other almost adult people in my house and he can't play. So I would tend to think that's pretty consistent person to person, and we need to see what it is.
Yep.
Is he playing you? See, that's my little
I've
one.
heard that one before,
That's
they do
so
say that
mommy,
to
But
about
no, like,
Yeah.
actually, because she's still at work, when he comes home, I actually do most of his homework with him. And I'm like, this child can't read, and like she said, he can't blend letter sounds, you tell him to, like, what does this letter say? What does that spell? I don't know, and he's so being serious. And we're just like, there's something wrong.
Because like, puppy, it's just like, what?
Oh my God.
So the PLAF is based on assessment data. It should, all those things I mentioned, talking to the teachers and yes, they're gonna draw in those grades from the report card and those sorts of things. But that's when you go back to your evaluations, your educational assessments, and pull in those needs, right? So think about the IEP, the program, as a 2-story house, and the bottom floor of the house is the PLAF. That's where we're starting, and we want to go upstairs. Okay? So just picture in your mind, we've got the bottom floor and the upper floor, and this is our starting point, the foundation of the goal to get upstairs. Okay, so where are we starting, and where do we want to end up? Okay, now, short-term objectives go in between, or those annual goals go in between. So maybe we have 3 goals, annual goals. What are the steps to get in between those? Because 3 steps to get upstairs will be climbing, right? There's only 3 steps to get upstairs, that's it. We need some interim steps. The needs, the strengths, all that stuff. That's where that comes into play. We've got to have that foundation to get up to that next level. We've got to tie all of that to the evaluation data, or it's supposed to be. Okay. Then we develop, once we have the PLAF, and it's a good PLAF, and it's got good information about where they presently are learning, what they're learning, where they are right now, and where we are intending to go, what the needs are. Now it's time to develop the IEP, the program. The whole program is the IEP. We have IEP goals and objectives, but the whole thing is the individualized education program. And so this is the time to be very clear, because anybody should be able to pick up that IEP and know what is that student supposed to do, and what am I as an educator supposed to do. So let's not be clear like this. Caution, water on road during rain. Duh. Caution, cross only when cars stop. Duh. Right? So we want IEP goals, when we're developing this, need to be very clear. We do need to keep it simple. We do need to state the obvious. We do need to use common sense. We got to make it so anyone can pick up that plan and know what to do. That's how you know it's a good plan. So that when Miss So-and-so is out on maternity leave and the substitute comes in, they will know how to carry on with that program. That's how we know it's a good one. Okay.
Do you know whether or not they actually provide that information to substitute teachers?
That's a very good question, because, and we had a discussion, I can't even remember where I was, about that. Where was I? I was at an art with a friend. She has a son that's in kindergarten, and he had a horrible, horrible day because there was a substitute one day. Well, it turns out the substitute didn't know that he is on the autism spectrum. And so we talked to that art about there needs to be a plan. In the substitute folder, there needs to be something separate that says, this is his deal. This is all about him.
It's not fair to the substitute.
Oh, it's not, no, or the
No, it's
child.
not fair to your child, period, but I mean, it's not fair to the substitute either.
And this was a huge thing because, you know, I mean, for 2 days after the child was traumatized by the whole thing. So there's this whole thing about, oh, well, confidentiality and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? They need to know that information. Because you're right, it's not fair to the sub. It's
Our
not fair to the
My
child.
kindergarten long-term sub knew,
Yeah.
because I made sure she knew.
And so there needs to be something in that subfolder. Yeah.
Even if they get, I'm a substitute, even if they get pulled out, you know, or go to, you know, get extra help at, you know,
Yeah.
LRC. Just because if you do it enough, you know, but I have a child that way, so, and I'll say it's friend, because the teachers, maybe they're sick and they had to go home.
Yeah.
They didn't, some of them will leave you a note, some of them won't.
Yeah.
But as a parent that I already know, okay, my child gets out, pulled out, if you need to go, so at the beginning of the test or whatever, I'll say, if you need to leave this classroom for any, you need
Yeah.
to go to LRC, come see me. And they'll come up and say, because
Yeah.
if you don't address it, Mallory, my little
They
one, was
won't
like,
do it.
I had a sub and I didn't go.
Yeah.
You still need to go, you know?
And that goes, that,
They
yeah.
so with the nurse, they had a
Mhm.
substitute,
Mhm.
and the nurse had to come down and get him to get his medication, because she just sent him on to the next thing, and he just went,
Yeah.
because he knows that his mother said, you will get in trouble and go to ISS if you disobey, so you better do what she says.
Exactly.
So he was like, I won't go to the nurse.
Yeah, so then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get through this part at least. What time is it? Okay. Noon, 1 minute. We have 10 minutes to try and finish this. So what do we do in this section? First of all, we need to review previous goals and progress. I don't know about y'all, but I've looked at our paperwork over time and I'll go, what happened to that goal? I don't think he really mastered that, but lo and behold, it disappears, right? So you have to look at the goals that are currently in place and say, where did we get to on this goal? And do we need to continue it? Guess what? It's okay if you didn't accomplish that goal within that year, continue it. My son had one goal every year in elementary school, and it had to do with personal space, because he has an issue, and he just goes up and hugs anybody. He's still that way, and he's 15 now, but the goal for him was to ask permission to hug somebody. And so we had to work on that for years to finally get him to that point. So it's okay for a goal to continue. It's not, you know, a black X. Oh, black X, you didn't get that goal. Okay, let's just look at what, maybe the goal wasn't appropriate when we wrote it. We thought it was, but maybe, you know, we were overzealous with that goal and, you know, there was no way to accomplish it, or I don't know. But we have to look at it and did we meet that goal? What progress is on it? Do we need to continue the goal? If they have mastered it, then let's put a different goal in place. Do we need a different goal? Whatever it is. Discuss the proposed IEPs. Again, we talked about get those ahead of time so you know what the school intention is. And bring your own drafts if you want to. Because remember, parent, part of the committee. Discuss proposed modifications and accommodations and discuss progress reporting. So all of those things take place during that portion. After we've developed the PLAF, now the program based on that. What are the goals for the next year? If they are on grade level, pretty much on grade level in a subject, let's say in math, they're on grade level. They may be struggling a little bit, but they're still on grade level. You don't need to have goals for things that are on grade level. Goals are for things that are outside of that they need that specially designed instruction for. So if they are on grade level, you don't have to have goals, like specific IEP goals, but they may need some accommodations for those. Like, you know, my son does okay in math, but he has an accommodation of calculator. Well, now they all have calculators, but in middle school, that was one of his accommodations. And he could even use it on the STAR test, you know, that kind of thing. Do they need modified curriculum? do they need fewer problems to do or fewer objectives to learn, things like that. Are the goals SMART? Are y'all familiar with SMART goals? SMART goals are, write it up here. This is just goals in general. In the business world, you can have SMART goals, but Wright's Law, in fact, it's in the Emotions to Advocacy book. Are y'all familiar with Emotions to Advocacy? Highly recommend this book, because this, not only it tells you just kind of how to get the emotion out and to advocate for your child, but it talks about evaluations and understanding evaluation data and stuff like that. I have a webinar that I did based on this, on evaluation data and their bell curve. I've been to the Wright's Law training 3 times, because you can't ever go enough to learn it. But, he has you learn the bell curve so you can look at evaluations and understand how to look at that data and stuff. So I did a webinar on it. It'll be posted hopefully soon in the archive. But SMART goals are in here. And so the S is specific. There we go, trying to write again. Measurable. You can apply this to every single goal. A is action. So what is the student going to do? John will, blah, blah, blah. Not what the school will do, what he is going to do, all right? Action-oriented. Realistic. And relevant. Okay. And time. There is a time limit to it. It's not unlimited. How do you know you're going to get to that? How do you know you've accomplished a goal if you can't measure it? So every IEP goal, you could measure it against this. You can read it and go, okay, this goal that they're proposing, is it specific? Remember, we said it needs to be simple, it needs to be specific, it needs to be clear. Is it specific? Can we measure it? Is there some sort of action when I read that? Do I know what the student is supposed to do? Is it realistic? Is it relevant to the class, to their needs, to the accommodations, evaluations, all of that? And is it time-oriented? So you can measure everything against the SMART. Who knows the difference between an accommodation and a modification? This is important to know.
One have to do with functional and one have to do with academic.
Okay. Yeah,
Modification
kind of.
changes the requirement.
Right.
And accommodation helps you meet the requirement.
Yes. So modification actually can change the TEKS requirement, right? So you are actually modifying expectations, modifying curriculum. Accommodations do not change the TEKS, they help you accomplish the same TEKS. Does that make sense? So accommodations change the how, not the what. How are we going to learn that TEKS objective? Just like every other student in the general education classroom or whatever. Or it changes the what. The modification changes the what are they expected to learn. So we need to understand that. Now, we also need to understand that when modified curriculum is in play, they're not going to be able to graduate with a regular diploma. Do they tell us that when they're in 2nd grade and we start doing modified everything? No. They need to, because we need to keep that into consideration. Now, I'm not saying that every child is going to be able to stay on grade level, because they're not. We've got different disabilities. if at all possible, a child needs to stay on grade level as much as possible and avoid the modifications. I'm talking about kids with learning disabilities, kids with ADHD, kids on the high functioning end of the autism spectrum, things like that, that can learn, right, the same objectives, but may need some heavy accommodations to be able to do it. Accommodations are not going to, you can have all kinds of accommodations and still graduate with a regular diploma. But you start getting modified curriculum where the objectives that they are expected to learn are not the same as every other child, they don't get to graduate with that regular diploma. They'll still get a diploma, but there's going to be some restrictions on it. Foundation now is what it's called. Don't get me started on graduation requirements. If y'all have high schoolers, you know, because my senior's on one plan and my freshman's on another plan because the state keeps making it better. Right? Goals should be measurable and we should measure them. Is teacher observation measurable? Do we see teacher observation all the time on IEP goals? And that's the only method that we're knowing whether or not they accomplish the goal is teacher observation. Where's the data? Show me the data. Okay? There could be teacher observation, but they need to tie it to something. They can't just go get to the annual art and go, well, let me think about that a minute. Yeah, I think they're doing okay on that.
Depends on who the teacher is.
Yeah. Okay, so teacher observation, you know what, you can have teacher observation in there, but there's nothing concrete about teacher observation because one teacher might observe one thing and one teacher observes another. It's totally subjective.
And I've had 2 different teachers argue in the yard.
Oh, in the art.
In the yard,
That's,
in front of me. And I'm
that's
like,
amusing,
yeah.
right?
I thought it was funny.
When is a parent, it says we're also supposed to discuss progress reporting. When are we supposed to get progress on IEP goals? Did you know we're supposed to get a progress report on IEP goals? When? You could.
I mean, she sends them, usually when I get my, like the regular grade goal stuff, she
Yes.
sends a little thing in
Right.
the packet.
That's
But
when.
anytime I email her, she'll send me,
Yeah.
or if she thinks there's something significant.
Well,
Mind
grades.
you, I have a really good special education lady, and she's an email person, and so am I.
Yeah, so you know what's going on. You're always in the loop. I know, I'm the same way. And grades are all online now. Is your school district, I mean, I can just go any old time and, see what's going on with grades because they're all right there at my fingertips, which, when I was in school, it wasn't that way. A grade book was a grade book, now it's online. But by law, we have to get IEP goal updates every time all students get report cards. So if you're on a 6-week grading period, then every 6 weeks you should get an update on IEP progress. If we're on a 9-week grading period in our district, so every 9 weeks we get an update on IEP progress. Hopefully it's not just in progress, because so many of these things are, it's in progress, And Katie did that when we were there, and then they switched over and they started doing percentages, which was awesome, because then I could see on there 50% or 53% or whatever. Then you know where they are on that goal. Well, we're halfway there, or whatever it is. There's something called a notice of proposal refusal. So let's say that we get to this part of the IEP plan in the art, and we say, I think my child needs X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And the school says, oh, no, we really don't see that. We don't think that we don't need to do that evaluation for that evaluation that you're requesting. Well, you can get that noted into the ARD minutes, but it's even better to get prior written notice or notice of refusal. So really they should give you, and that's why it's good to ask for stuff in writing. You ask in writing and you expect the reply in writing because that creates your paper trail. which is very important. Remember, if it's not in writing, it hasn't been said. We can talk all day long back and forth, and, you know, we have parents that would call and say, you know, I've been asking the school for 2 years to do an evaluation. The minute they put it in writing, all of a sudden there's action. Why? Because you now have written documentation that you submitted that. So if the school says, no, we really don't think that we need to do that, we're just going to do RTI, response to intervention. You've heard this, right? Okay, well then I'm going to need a notice of refusal in writing. There's actually a form on the TEA website that you can get. Prior written notice form, this is it. It's actually a U.S. Department of Ed form. It says it right there. But it's called prior written notice, which our ARD notice is prior written notice. You know, they have to notify us at certain times that things are going to happen or not happen, what their proposals and refusals are. But even when a parent asks for something, you can ask for that notice of refusal. But I'm going to need that in writing, that you're refusing that. What do you think happens sometimes when we ask for them to put their refusal in writing?
They back down.
They think twice about, do I really want to put that in writing or not? Okay, so you could actually, do you have a notice of refusal that is in your forms or whatever? If not, here's mine. Could you fill this out for me? They think twice. So,
You do that once, you'll never have a problem.
and this is what it says, okay? Let me just read it to you, okay? This is the prior written notice. Description of action that the school district proposes or refuses to take. Our ARD notice is a prior written notice because they are proposing the annual ARD, right? Or they're proposing updated goals or whatever it is. Explanation of why they are proposing or refusing to take that action. Description of each evaluation procedure, assessment record, or report the school district is using to decide whether to propose or refuse. What? Has to be based on data. Description of any other choices that the IEP team considered and the reasons why those choices were rejected. Oh, what? We're supposed to talk about it with the IEP team before we decide? Oh. Description of other reasons why the school district proposes or refuses the action. Do you think they're going to want to do that?
No.
Resources for the parent to contact for help in understanding Part B of the IDEA, i.e. the special education director for your district, the Region Service Center, TEA. If this notice is not an initial referral for evaluation, how can the parent obtain a copy of a description of the procedural safeguards? They need to provide that. So notice of prior written notice, notice of proposal refusal, it's sometimes called. Anytime you're asking for something and they don't want to do it, I need that in writing, please.
Is there a place where you can go and download that and just sort of?
Yes, I think I just Googled prior written notice to find this one. TEA website has it, but I did find out something very interesting at our conference last weekend on this framework. .esc.18.net or esc18.net has a section called Documents, a tab at the top that says Documents, and this is a TEA website. And there's all kinds of documents in there. There was a parent that said, you know, she's the one that the 504 is not really appropriate. She's asking for special ed, and she's like, I need that OHI form. And I said, well, you can ask the school to give you the OHI form, but they might not want to. And then I went, and then I thought, I wonder if it's in that documents. And I went there, and sure enough, the OHI form, the TEA sample form for all school districts is in there. I said, here, you can just use this. If they don't want to use yours, you can just use this one. So I don't know if this one is in there, but I expect that this prior written notice is in there because this is a U.S. Department of Ed form. Okay. All right, let's see. Oh. Okay. Let me just briefly go through. Okay, I'm not going to go in detail on all of this. Sometimes at this point in the ARD, you're also, if there's other things involved, like a bib, that would be talked about at this point, right? Anything that is in the program is talked about in this part. If a child has a bib, okay, that's a behavior intervention plan. It's supposed to be based on positive behavior interventions. It's supposed to be a plan to change behavior that is inappropriate. Behaviors can also be addressed with goals and objectives. Behaviors can also be addressed with accommodations. You don't always have to have a behavior intervention plan. My boss, John, he says when he was doing this presentation, he said BIP actually stands for bad in public in the opinion of the school, right? So, well, bad in public, you gotta have a BIP. Well, a BIP is based on a functional behavior assessment, FBA. And, it's good if a student needs that. But if they don't need it, don't get one, okay? Because once they get that BIP in there and the school, the teacher's flipping through this and they see that BIP, what are they automatically gonna think? Bad.
Yeah.
Bad in public, right? Or they're gonna think, uh-oh, this kid has a BIP, there's something going on here, right? So if you don't need it, don't get one. That's kind of the point of that. Address it in other ways. Address it with goals and objectives if possible. I'm not saying that not every child doesn't. Sometimes it's good to get that functional behavior assessment. Remember that manifestation determination that we talked about? I did not mention when we were talking about that if they determine that it is a manifestation of the disability, an FBA is required and a BIP to be considered for that student because the behavior needs to be addressed. Okay, so they do have to do a functional behavior assessment and look at the behavior. Yes, ma'am.
If they do an FBA, are they required to implement a BIP or no?
That's still an art committee decision.
So you could, because I requested an FBA for behaviors, but I'm curious if I really want to accept doing a BIP or not.
Yeah,
Because of this reason, yeah.
they're gonna have recommendations of how to, change and implement that. But it still comes down to the art committee deciding, and of course you're part of that, so,
Right.
yes.
If they have the child in a behavior classroom, do they have to have a BIP?
I don't think so, but there better be some goals and objectives for that, to have that placement, right? The BIP really should be written to address those, it's a plan to change the behavior, and it should be written by a behavior specialist.
And I've had a bit for my child, when he was particularly in later elementary school, middle school, high school, he really didn't need a bib. However, I kept it because it said why these behaviors exist, how not to provoke these behaviors. Like he has Asperger's, so he has face issues. If you get in his face, he's going to react to that.
Yeah.
If you get on to him and he doesn't quite understand the style of communication, it looks like he's smirking. So he would get sent to the office for smirking because they didn't understand when you have Asperger's, you may display inappropriate emotions for the situation.
Yeah.
So I kept his bib in place just because if these situations occur, this is how to diffuse it, this is how
Yes.
to prevent it. And it held the teachers accountable.
Yes.
Because as opposed to saying, did we follow the IEP objectives, I said, you did not follow his behavior intervention plan, you did not take this step,
Yep.
and you signed it on this day. I'm more of the assertive type of-
Exactly.
I don't make cupcakes before the meeting, but I'm going to, please remove this from his file, remove him from this
Yeah.
punishment, because you failed to do what you were supposed to do.
And that's a great
So,
point.
I kept it in place, even
Yeah.
though he probably doesn't need it, but it was good just to hold the teachers accountable for recognizing what provokes him, how to prevent it, why he's acting the way he's acting.
Yeah,
Because he's not quirky.
that's perfect.
He's
That's-
quirky, he's crazy, he's
Yeah, and that's really how a behavior intervention plan should function.
And
You know?
you know what I found, unfortunately, is he's too intelligent to have these issues. He's very highly intelligent, but it doesn't mean he can work well in a group of people.
Right.
So, you know, a
That
lot of teachers
function
is like, there's really
is-
nothing wrong with him, so he's way too smart for him not to understand the communication.
Yeah, well, sorry, that's what Asperger's is,
Yeah.
right? You know, let me give you the
Yeah, he
definition.
told me, he says, one day a teacher was just really getting on to him, yelling and screaming at him, and I said, well, what was he upset about? He says, I don't know. And I'm like, well,
Because I was just being myself, and they didn't like that.
why
Yes,
is he
ma'am.
upset? You know?
That can also be a protection with law enforcement, when they try and call law enforcement in and arrest your kid and take them out,
Yeah,
you know, which has happened to even 8-year-olds. you know.
yeah.
Maybe I'll change
They figured out my kid's mom was crazy, so they don't
They
even,
have a kindergarten
as a matter of
there,
fact, and I don't know,
there.
I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. Part of his intervention plan for behavior is that a teacher cannot write an office referral on him. The teacher has to send him to the counselor, and the counselor decides whether or not the behavior is a direct result of his disability, or if he's just being a bad kid. Now, what are the odds that a counselor is going to say he's just a bad kid? So they were not allowed to write office referral on him. He had to go to the counselor and have a session with her, and if she decided you're just, you know, you're just a deviant of society, then he can get an office referral. Otherwise, he didn't get office referrals.
Wow. So if the BIP is implemented correctly, then it's an asset for the student, right? But how often is that? And you know, and you're a parent that is gonna hold their feet to the fire too. So,
Working on the kind of gentle.
I know.
Working on
We'll talk about assertiveness later.
it. Kind of gentle.
Like some parents, like if they don't know that they can do that, they're not going to do it.
True. And we're gonna talk about,
telling them, I don't know, I'm more of a documentation person. I do my documentation.
yeah,
I give them a chance, I call and say, have you done this yet? Oh, no, because that's what was last year's plan, she didn't do it. And then I said, okay, well, I'll let you know tomorrow, and then I followed up with an email.
Yeah.
With Danielle, I don't have to do that.
Paper
I call
trail.
her and I can trust her to do it. So
Yeah.
I don't have to always follow it up with an email, but I
and there,
can.
yeah. And there's
I always
no
give them a chance to do the right thing first.
Right, and that's why, later on after lunch, we're gonna talk about those personality styles and things like that, and realize that there's different ways that we all approach things. Okay, the autism supplement, this only applies for a student that has an eligibility of autism, and that's anything under that autism umbrella, the autism spectrum. We're not gonna go in detail on this because we will look at the autism supplement in the day 2 webinar because it is in my son's ARD. And you'll know that there's 11 different strategies that they have to consider for a student with autism. I don't know if you caught it in the slideshow at the very beginning that I showed you, but the autism supplement came about because parents in Texas, it's only a Texas thing. No other state has an autism supplement. Parents in Texas went to our legislature and said, you know, there are some needs like social skills and things that our students on the autism spectrum need especially, and we want those addressed. And so it's been in place since the 80s. It started out with 7 strategies and they expanded it, I don't know how long ago it's been, but they expanded it to 11.
Other states, I have a friend who lives here with the one child with autism. She works in Washington now. She had to sign paperwork because she works with, she doesn't work in inclusion, she works in, can't remember what they call it there, but it's not what we call it here.
Yeah,
She just got the daylights beat out of her.
Really?
The child broke her, he is in 5th grade, he broke her nose and he had black eyes, because she had to sign a waiver saying that she knew this was gonna happen. This stuff could happen to her, and it doesn't happen here.
wow.
So,
Yeah,
because
there's
they're
some.
not addressing those things.
Right, exactly. So we're fortunate here. So, you know, you can look at more on the autism supplement. You just need to be aware, even if you don't have a child on the autism spectrum, if you're going to an ARD with a parent that does, you have to be aware of what's in the autism supplement. So we will go over that in the day 2 briefly. But you can also go to Texas Project First or, you know, TEA. You can just Google Texas Autism Supplement and you can find out about it. But Texas Project First website has a good explanation of all of the indicators on the autism supplement. These are recommendations, they're not mandatory, but they have to be considered. So it does get the art committee to talk about these things and consider how they're going to be addressed for a student with autism. We also have supplements for hearing impairment and visual impairment. Those make separate, forms that are filled out. And so if you're going to an art with a student like that, then you'll just want to inform yourself a little bit about what is supposed to be in that. Transition also has a separate supplement usually, and we're going to talk about transition more in the Day 2 webinar. We're not going to spend time talking about that, but this transition, we could spend all day talking about transition. But that's also discussed at this point. We also talk about services to be provided. This is where you talk about related services and accommodations, modifications, what START has, all that kind of stuff. Supplemental services, do they need ESY services, extended school year, all of those things are discussed also. So this is the primary part of the art. This is the meat of the art, the PLAF and the IEPs, that's the meat of it. That's, where all the action takes place and what's that plan is gonna be. Okay, so let's eat lunch and we'll get situated, take a little break, eat, relax for a little bit. We'll finish up step 6, 7, and 8 very quickly. Those are quick. And then we're going to do the leadership part because we're going to be out of here by 2:30. Okay? So, good. Let's see.
Yeah, 2:59. She said 3.
She said 3.
Yeah, is when they're gonna lock it.
They're locking it at 3.
So you have till 2:59.
I have 2:59, right? So we'll be.
Do y'all remember what you ordered?
Oh, God bless you.
You were gluten free.
Yes.
I refuse to do it.
Who's gluten-free?
I won't do it.
What?
Who got gluten-free?
I refuse.
Let's see.
I refuse.
Tammy, you were turkey on wheat.
Turkey on wheat. Was that
Yes,
Barbara
it
that
is.
was gluten-free?
anything.
Who was gluten-free?
Me.
Oh, you need to speak with her who's supposed to be gluten-free that refuses.
I don't want to.
Kelsey is turkey on white.
Yeah, and CJ's Deli does gluten-free.
That's Kelsey. And what do you remember what you ordered? Ham on white.
Yeah, she refuses.
I refuse.
She has
Probably the only person that ordered
She's
ham.
supposed to be gluten-free and she's not.
Yeah, well, it's not easy, but it's possible.
No.
Turkey on wheat.
I refuse to eat these anymore. I don't like it.
I think it's possible.
I don't.
It just
really care.
Yeah, that's
Even though they all like it, so.
I didn't They didn't have most of it ready. I'd been there for like 30 minutes and I was like, okay, well, we're just.
I bet this is not
Did I do Coke? Is that what I did?
I don't know what you did.
They are so famous for teaching. In fact, we were at the Right Law training, in fact, they had gotten box lunches
And this is
and
ice.
it said gluten-free and everything, and so I was like, okay,
Yeah,
well,
no,
it has a little sticker on
You
it.
don't want to do it too long.
I swear.
The guarantee is not gluten-free, but they don't get it.
I was kind of wondering what.
This is like a macadamia nut, there you go. Thank you.
You were vegetarian, right? So I put yours over there. You're the only one I remember.
Different than everybody else, I'm not chancing it. So then they make an announcement. We're all
Did they give you
eating
fruit
lunch,
instead of a
and then they make
cookie?
an announcement. The
Okay.
free lunch is probably have regular
Did you get-
bread.
did you get
lunch? No, it had a cookie. It's fine, I brought my M&Ms, I bring M&Ms everywhere.
Somebody else like this.
I said,
I need help with sweet tea.
no, they're not even that. They all die. I think they're white girl. I think they're white chips. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Those sort of.
I'd like to eat it, but how long did I go on that?
Sweet tea and sweet tea.
Technically, according to her, the only thing that I'm not allergic to is rice and potatoes. What do I eat? I know it.
And
I
then
went
like, oh, that's how
13
you
times in 1 year,
This is
but
mine.
since then, I've only had 1 or 2 reactions.
One or two.
What, I can't remember. My throat swells. That's my allergic reaction to everything. I'm only gonna die, and I have to take 2 everything before I get to the hospital.
Girl, don't make a way to live. It's not that hard to be gluten-free, really.
Yes.
So many things. Hey, I've been doing this for 14 years, and when I started, there was nothing.
I tried it. I
There
really
was
did.
not, Jason's Deli option.
I tried it, but I got sick of the flavor of the rice. And I can't do the almond or the soy. I had to do rice because that was the only thing I was allergic to. So I mean, my options were like 1/3 of what is in gluten-free. I was like, I can't do it anymore. I was like, if I taste another thing of rice, I'm sick. I'd rather go to the ER.